Welcome to Captain of Industry. My name is Nilaus and we are back here by popular demand. I've received quite a few comments on my other videos like, oh, when's the next Captain of Industry video coming? And here it is. So why have I not released more Captain of Industry videos? Well, because I have a super well functional base. I completed everything over on Steam, on Livestream. And things are just chugging along. I have also built like the most complicated thing in the game. That's not the rocket. That is actually the fast breeder reactor. And that's why I thought, you know, I really should show you how awesome the fast breeder reactor is, and therefore make this into a tutorial on how to make and how to operate the fast breeder reactor, because that's kind of the pinnacle of update 1 and something that's just basically going to solve all your power needs for any foreseeable future. And we see it here after the Red Forest. We are coming into our nuclear power plant, and this is what it looks like. So, if you want to see more Captain Industry, well, I'm sorry, but you're probably going to have to wait a little bit until there's more updates in the game. But enjoy this one. And we have plenty of other good factory games, both on the docket and also on the horizon as well. As usual, liking and subscribing and commenting is always very helpful. So if you are enjoying the Captain of Industry covers and want to see more in the future, you know what to do. So I decided that I wouldn't be sort of building it on stream on this episode, because it just takes so long to build all of this and that it would just be not really very valuable. So I'm going to go walk through it and explain how it works instead. We're going to start with the unlocking of the tech. It is the very last tech here. It's even beyond the rocket launcher here, and we need some mocks to unlock it. That's the first thing, is that you really need something to unlock it. But it also has a hugely complex formula, and that can be super intimidating. And it was actually something that, even for me, was something that almost kept me from doing it. But I was like, no, you know what? It's kind of the new cool thing. And once you get it down, it's actually not that bad. And it's super sustainable and super easy to manage. But it looks super intimidating. So let's try to unintimidate it. When we built the first nuclear power plant, you can see the guide on how to build that nuclear power plant in the card linked now. Then we are going to, at this point, get some nuclear waste, which nuclear waste will allow us to get nuclear reactor 2 and also the MOX process. Here's my thought on it. Forget about it. Now, what you need to do is you, of course, need some MOX fuel here, some spent MOX fuel, in order to unlock the last one. So what I would recommend doing is take your original nuclear power plant. When you get the unlock, you unlock the reactor 2, you upgrade to a reactor 2, which is fun because you have to shut it down before you can upgrade it. That's always nice. And once it's upgraded, it actually has, instead of 3 steps, it has a 4-step, but I would have to redesign the whole thing in order to work. But it also has this MOX process, and I would recommend build the MOX process, takes the MOX waste, put it into a junk box like that, forget about it. And then you can unlock the fast breeder. I would not deal with the MOX process. It's a little bit better, but it's really not that much better. And you'd rather want the spent fuel in order to use that for fuel for your fast breeder reactor. So I would skip the MOX after unlocking the fast breeder. Let's start by looking at the process of the actual reactor. So if we look here, we can see that it uses the fuel, core fuel. It converts core fuel into core fuel spent. It has 4 steps. Each step takes 1 core fuel and makes it into 1 spent core fuel. That's nice. It also down here has some enriched, some blanket fuel that gets enriched, and it also usually has water, and outputs it as steam here. The way it works is that since it has 4 steps, I have built the power plant in 4 steps. We'll come back to that a bit later. But the essence is that each of these produces 60 megawatt of power. That means the whole thing can produce 240 megawatts of power. That is quite impressive and should take care of your power needs. Additionally, because of this process and this process here, particularly the enrichment process here on the blanket fuel, we are actually getting a very, very, very efficient build once it's up and running. On top of that, there's no pollution from this, and there is no waste at all. So that's quite impressive as well. So let's talk about how to get it started. The first thing is it requires fuel, core fuel, but it does not require blanket fuel. This is something extra. If you have blanket fuel, it'll get through this process. If you don't have the blanket fuel, it won't do this process, but it'll still be outputting as much as possible. So this is just a way for you to recover, to use the enriched blanket fuel for additional fuel recovery. Now, in the beginning, in order for us to get started, I have to make the first core fuel, and the only way to make core fuel in the beginning is by using the enriched uranium 20%. Now, the enriched uranium 20%, let's just go into the menu here. The enriched uranium 20% is here, and it can be produced in one way, two ways. It can either be produced from plutonium, or it can be produced from the enriched uranium 4. This is also enriched uranium 4, so basically those are the two options. What I'm doing, since I don't need a lot, then I'm actually converting the plutonium into here. The reason why I do that is because I will have some plutonium that really can't do anything else. So I don't want to do... I want to get rid of the plutonium in this way. So we have some nasty stuff that we can then get rid of. Plutonium, though, can be taken the spent fuel that we cut from our normal nuclear reactor and then convert it into some processed uranium and some plutonium and some fission product. Fission product is basically just turning into recyclables after 100 years. The plutonium is a nasty stuff that we can then use for making, either use it into our MOX, which I wouldn't recommend doing, and using into here to make our enriched uranium for 4 to 20%. That's what I would recommend. And that's how we make the core fuel, just with a pinch of salt. So that's the first process we have to attach to our original nuclear power plant. That basically goes out here. We can see I'm taking the spent fuel. All my spent fuel goes in here. You'll probably have a storage to start that you will need to empty. Add a dash of acid and molten glass, and then you get the processed uranium 1, some plutonium, and some fission product. You then take the fission product in here. The fission product gets upgraded from 1% to 4% or enriched. And you actually get a little bit of depleted uranium, add some of the hydrogen fluoride, not a problem. And then we also take the plutonium from this process and then combine it with the now 4% enriched to get the 20% enriched. The 20% enriched is the input we need over at our nuclear power plant to get the first ones rolling. So you need to build this and fill it up here to 20 and then something in storage before you can even get it started. So that should be something you just start that process and then you can work on it while you work on building all the rest of the infrastructure. Now that we built the first core fuel, we should also look at how to do the blanket fuel. So the blanket fuel is basically made in this location here. It's very, very simple. Depleted uranium plus a pinch of salt, and you get some blanket fuel. So that's a very, very cheap product. It will then be fed in here. So just feed it into this, and then you get the enriched out. So now that we have the initial products to get started, let's talk about the recycling, because that's the most important thing and the reason why this is actually net positive. So let's go through the core fuel first, the recycling process for that. Well, actually they're mixed up. So what I've done here is I have 3 inputs of core fuel. Core fuel is a liquid, oddly enough, and it comes in here. This one is the lowest priority. You can see there's no priority on this one because this was only for topping up. And then after that, we'll be relying on the recycling process. Then if I do, no, I can't even get those. So basically what we're going to look at is out here, we have our spent fuel, spent core fuel. It goes into this monstrosity nuclear reprocessing plant, and it gets spent core fuel plus acid and molten glass. I guess those are things we need, and a little bit of steel. And then we get the core fuel plus some fission product. The fission product just goes in here and becomes recyclable, so not caring about it. This looks like, if you see, this takes 10 inbound and 8 outbound, so there's an 80% recovery. That means we only need to sort of, if you look at here, when it's fully operational, this will be producing 4, and then it'll be actually recovering 3.2 of that. So we only have a deficit of 0.8 from this process that we have to top up with that one. But it gets better, and this is why we actually have the blanket fuel, because the blanket fuel doesn't add anything to the process. It just goes in here, and then because it's close to the reactor, it absorbs some juiciness and becomes enriched. And in here, we then take the enriched, and the enriched then goes into becoming blanket fuel, like the normal dud ones, at a rate of 80%. But it also becomes additional core fuel. Now this one, when fully operational, consumes or produces 4.8 core fuel at the same time, or 4.8, and since 20% of the enriched is becoming core fuel, then that actually means that we get 0.96 core fuel per cycle. And if we add that on top of what we got here, the 3.6, that actually means we have 4.16 core fuel per cycle. which is actually more than is needed. So we actually have building up additional fuel as this one proceeds. This is a little bit weird because that means it's net positive in terms of fuel, and this one will actually never operate anymore again. This also means that over time these pipes are going to be filling up, and you need to stop doing something. And the only way that I can see that you can do it is by making sure that you don't keep feeding it blanket fuel, because there's no other process for core fuel. It can only go in here. There's no other core process for enriched. It has to go in here. There's no other process for blanket fuel. It has to be processed. Only the way it can be done is here. So you can't trash it. You can't junk it. You can't anything. You can't convert it. And on top of that, you cannot store it. So that's another interesting little thing. If you look at the products, there is no core fuel here, so you can't store it for later and just go like, well, I have a big buffer, don't care. You can, however, delete the pipes and then rebuild it. That's super cheeky. Or you can build a pipe storage that will last you 100 years, or you can just make sure that you stop putting blanket fuel in so that the process becomes less effective after a while. All those options seem a little bit weird, but do keep it in mind that you will need to do some kind of handling of it. Now, all the stuff that I said in here, like the salt, the acid, the steel, the glass, all of that stuff is completely irrelevant at this stage in your factory, because you can just bring it in. They are very low quantities, so just bring them in like this and you should be good. So with that handled, we've now covered all of the recycling of core fuel and blanket fuel, and that's actually demystified quite a bit. So let's look at the actual power plant. Now this one is outputting not just high pressure steam, but super pressure steam, which is super amazing because that goes into a super pressure, and here super pressure steam, which is incredibly effective. So the normal one is 12, the low pressure one is 16, but the super pressure is 18. That means one step of this nuclear power plant is outputting 96 super steam, and that's why we have 384. So 96 super steam, that is what each of these modules is handling. You can see here this takes 48 super steam and 48 super steam, producing 36 plus 24 plus 12. So all in all, this is producing 72 mechanical power. The 72 mechanical power gets converted into 15 plus 15, 15, so that converts into 60 megawatt of power. The reason why I've done this and made it so explicit with these inputs and outputs is because in the beginning you want to, first, probably you don't have materials to construct all of these, so you produce one of the rows and you block off all the other inputs so that all the water only comes in. You can then step up here. You can do the first one and then only have one row running. Once you either have more fuel running in your process or you've constructed all of these, then you can enable the next and next and next. And that's kind of how it works. If you go from 0 to step 4, it is sometimes it's going to be a little bit weird. So not it could run dry and not sort of have enough energy in here, not heat, in order to do it, and then it outputs low pressure steam instead of super steam. So you step it up gradually and you step it down gradually if you need to take it out for some odd reason. So let's look at the water cycle. Each of these are inputting 96 super steam, and at the very end out here we are outputting 96 depleted steam. So depleted steam is a low value product. It goes into these 4 large cooling towers and they will recover 72. Now at this point you might say no, you can do something better. Yes, you can, but at this point I don't care. What you could do better is make less of these, maybe make 3 of those, and then take the 96 steam here instead, 96 depleted steam, instead of converting it to 72, you can get it in here, and then use the depleted steam, take 4 of these depleted steam, and then get a net water positive outbound, and then you can sort of have it be almost water neutral. Now I don't want to do that because at this point power is not really a concern. You can see 406 megawatt of power available, but also I want to make it as clean as possible. This part is difficult enough, so I want my nuclear power, or my water cycle and my power plant to be as simple as possible. Therefore, just get water in, just get it out. We now have a deficit of 96 water per cycle, and I'll top up the water cycle here by just using some high pressure steam, which I get from, just very simple, get it from the boiler here and here, and this boiler can feed these two 100%, and they get this back. This is basically just taking the water coming out. The water goes into become steam. The 24 of it becomes steam. That means that it's net producing up to 66 water per cycle. Has some brine. I'm just gonna dump the brine. You can use the brine to make the salt, but again, I wanted to make sure that this thing is has as few interdependencies as possible. Now from this location, I am feeding water primarily. Not primarily, but into both of these locations, because it is producing a little bit more. I should actually, yes, it's feeding it first back into the boiler, because otherwise it gets stuck. But this big bob here is actually in case of emergency. Let's say I am working on deconstructing things and suddenly I break the water supply to my reactor, then it can at least last a few minutes, a few cycles, by just consuming this giant water reservoir. And we all know that that's you need to have a backup reservoir, because you know, there could be like a dam that gets blown up, and therefore you need your backup reservoir available to cool the reactor. So this is basically just the backup reservoir, and we feed it from here. We don't feed it from the recyclables, the recycled water. We feed it from our surplus water here, and then we have the going into here, and then we have the water cycle again, and that basically just gets the entire flow of this one, the power plant, the water recycler, the construction and recycling of core fuel and blanket fuel. Very simple. These are low quantities inbounds and outbounds. And then we also have the fuel here that goes in here. Interestingly enough, if this is working at 100%, as in it's on step 4, then it will take 80 years to fill this one up, and it takes 100 years for them to convert. So you probably need actually 2 of these, ironically, just if it's working at full speed, before you start getting some of the retired waste coming out, which will then just become here will be recyclables and then brought back into circulation and become, I don't know, furniture or something. I guess that's kind of it. If we just marvel at this, I think this is a super cool build. I think it's really well done. It's really well designed. It's a challenge to set up, but once it's set up, like all the things in Captain of Industry, as long as you make sure that you're on top of your supply and demand, then it just works flawlessly and produces a beautiful 240 megawatts of electrical power, thereby just completely negating basically any other power supply in your base. So I hope this was useful, interesting, engaging, and maybe the fast breeder reactor is not as mysterious anymore. And hopefully you can build it in your own base, and as sort of as the last part. Now, I don't have any intention of making any more Captain Industry video. I was kind of considering maybe do a rocket launch, but rocket launch is honestly not that difficult to design. So it's just put some hydrogen and just watch the rocket launch. But maybe there could be a need for sort of lessons learned and key takeaways and a base tour as well, if that has any interest. So let me know if there's an interest for sort of a wrap up of this update 1 series, and then we do that. Otherwise, make sure you stay subscribed to the channel so that you can keep up with all the cool things here on the channel. There are many more factory games coming in the near future: Tectonica, Desynced, Foundry, as well as updates to Dyson Sphere Program, Factorio, Satisfactory. You know, it's a beautiful time to be a content creator in the factory simulation space. Also, of course, if you don't want to make it easy and just get the blueprints of this, I don't release the blueprints because you might have it in a different way. But any Patreon supporters can always just download the save game. So if you are a Patreon supporter, thank you very much. And you can just download the save and then just have a look at it and mess around with it and make some improvements from there. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take care. And as always, stay effective.